This is Dirshu Mishnah Berurah as we wrap up. Baruch Hashem, Siman Kuf Ayin Hey, the halachas of Hatov Ameitiv. We begin with Sif Dalid. Says the Machaber, Ein levarich Hatov Ameitiv Kinish Acher Imoy. This is what we mentioned at the end of the previous year. Another qualification of Hatov Ameitiv, that it's only going to be if there is someone else with you. You cannot make Hatov Ameitiv by yourself. You have to be drinking with someone else. Why? Says the Machaber, the words are mashma. We already spoke about in the first sif where Hatov Ameitiv came from. It comes from the Chayad Merkiv. You don't want to be too happy. You want to be a little more somber. You want to remember that Rugi Beitar at such a moment that could bring you to Kalos Reish. But the words, the verbiage itself, Hatov Ameitiv, sounds like to someone else. You need another person. Then you can still make the bracha. Meaning it's not a din. Says the Machaber that your wife can't do it. She has to be a separate person. No, your wife will work as well. You just need to have another person drinking with you. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Sivkot and Etes Vav. Imai, with you. And drinking from that wine. Someone else is eating with you, but you're the only one drinking. Your friend is the only one drinking, says the Magen Avraham. In such a scenario, there's no bracha. So Mishnah Berurah over here adds on another tonight. Not only is it enough, not only do you need, that your friend drinks with you, he needs to have a shutfis. He needs to be partners with you in that wine. If he's just a guest, the Baal Bayis gives him rishos to drink, and we're going to explain exactly what this means. Then in such a scenario, Baal Bayis gives 1 cup of wine to his guest. Baal Bayis takes another cup of wine himself. Such a scenario, the Baal Bayis says, well, would not be able to make the bracha. Let's not run too fast. Says Mishnah Berurah, unless, and this hopefully will help a lot of us, the Baal Bayis puts the bottle on the table, and anyone is allowed to take as much as they want. That is enough, says the Mishnah Berurah. That's called shutfis. The fact that you could take as much and whenever you want wine, and you do not need the Baal Bayis to pour you a cup each time, that gives you a level of shutfis, level of bailus in the wine. And then you and the Areach can make the bracha on Hatov Ameitiv. Continues Mishnah Berurah, since you have to support them, it's as if already they have a chelik in it. Mishnah Berurah now sums up other dinim as well. You have to drink together. Has to be biyachad, has to be imoi, has to be a seibu. It can't be one drinking in one room, one drinking in the next room. Quotes Mishnah Berurah, the Perach Sheisha and the Arachayim are maskim she'ein levar berachas hatov elik sheshasu shneihem mishtei hayenois. They both have to drink from both wines. However, aval im shasa shteihem rak b'yayin arishan u'miyayin hasheni shasu rak echad le'hapach. 2 drink for the first one and 1 drinks for the second. Ein levarich. So that'll be a scenario of kiddush, for example. Everyone drank from kiddush, and then you open a second wine, and only the Baal Bayis drinks. He cannot make Hatov Ameitiv unless he has a drinking partner in that second bottle of wine drinking with him. Says the Mishnah Berurah further, Kasu Achrayim, says that according to Al Yerabban and Derech HaChaim, Berch Satov, Yech Lavarech, but Yavid, Av Shekvar Shasov, and Iskik Shayin Bepiv. Says Al Yerabban, what if you took a drink? And maybe for many of us, if this is the first time that we're realizing there is halachas are relevant to us, so it might not be in our mind, so we take a drink and we realize when it's in our mouth. What do? A chiddush. Sheboila, you swallow it, and you make a bracha afterwards. Even though we know usually, what do you mean you have to make a bracha beforehand? Aval, you still allowed to make a bracha afterwards. Aval in this case, if you remember, unfortunately, after you drink, then ain't kedai levarech. Meaning, if it's still in your mouth when you remember, then you could swallow and make the bracha, because that's called the bracha goes back on that which you drank. But if you finish drinking and then you remember, it says Mishmur, you should not make the bracha. Me, however, if there's more wine, why? There's still more wine, then you'd be allowed to make the bracha then. Finally, we conclude with Sif Hey and Vav we'll take together. Says the Mechaber. And Rabbi Seudah, there's many people sitting together at one meal. Each one should make a bracha to himself. Should not be might see each other. Why? As we've seen, they might answer Amen during the meal, and we don't want that, says the Rambam. If you're just drinking, then you could be might see each other. As we've seen, that the Eitzah is, of course, to say Rabbi say, and then everyone will stop, and then you could be out to them in the bracha, because then they can say Amen, there's no food in their mouth. We pass like the Ish Machmirim, we get both dinim over there. Number one, they stop, they'll be able to focus on the bracha, and number two, there won't be a sakana, because they will not be drinking. Wine from two barrels, but the same type of wine. If within 40 days of its creation you put it to two kelim, that itself will have two different types. You can make a teiva meitiv. But then so explains the Mishnah over here. The kivan shkola echad toisis bechavis b'neyatzins. Each one ferments in its own battle. B'shir barrel b'shir zman zeh adayin chadashu. Until within 40 days, it's called chadash, and therefore each one will change on its own. And this is really where we get from the fact, even though in previous sifim and sifkatans, Mishmura mentioned that maybe it has to be a different type of wine and a better grape, etc. This is where you get that all the wines that we have that are going to be created, they're all going to definitely be different barrels, different tastes. Therefore, you'll have that type of meitim. And then we'll wrap up with a few last dirshus. Says the dirshu, note number 11. In the varach berachas hatov, do you have to have a share of how much to drink? Says the Chayim, yes. You have to have a revius of each wine. That's a shir chashav bracha achrayna. However, comes on the Das Torah, and he adds on and he says, if there's two revius, he explains, even if two people combine to revius, it's not enough. Ella, each person has to have their own revius. The Mechasitzlik says the same. The Buchat Shali Rabbah writes, Mistaver, that you have to drink from the wine kashir bracha achrayna, meaning you have to drink moloi lugmav. Ach efsher, for this maybe it's enough. But then you drink more. Similarly, the Shoel Tzion says lechatchila you drink revius, but b'diavad moloi lugma will be enough. However, Dirshu points out, which I'm sure many are wondering, the Shulchan Aruch, no one mentioned anything about a shear. Everywhere else where there's a shear, they tell us about it. So says the Dirshu, we have the Stemus Apaiskim, they didn't mention the shear. Says the Chaim Nug, says the Shulchan, where he's proves from the Sefer B'chas Yosef, any amount of the wine is enough, and that's Lamaisa. We see again, we'll quote the same Rebelsky, that is the Psak Halacha. We are not Machmar, maybe Svarnamar, for a revius. And finally, note number 12 over here, what about grape juice? It's a world war. The Lotzion says there's no Atayva Meitiv, because it's not Chashav. We've had this grape juice shayla reoccurring the past few shirim, and it's not Misameach. Rav Yashiv says, if you have wine after grape juice, the same thing, you don't make a teiva meitiv. However, in this Karelitz or Chaim Pechasheinberg, if you're like a Fisher, they say if you have wine after grape juice, you would yes make a teiva meitiv, which would be very relevant often in Kiddush. If people make Kiddush on grape juice, they can't drink wine, and they have a little bit of wine later. But if they mix the wines in grape juice, l'chayr, you get out of the shayla, and that is a teiva meitiv. Hopefully, we're realizing that the halachos are more relevant than we realized. And we'll just conclude, what was Rebelsky's case? Just a reminder. A Friday night, you make Kiddush, you have two bottles on the table. One's a sweet wine and one's a better dry wine. You make Kiddush on the sweet wine rye because people like it better. You drink and other people drink it. During the meal, you still have the sweet wine on the table. And then you open up the dry wine, which is better. And you drink and other people drink it. There you get all the conditions. It's during the meal. You have two people drinking together. You both drink from the wine. The first one is not finished, and it's definitely not worse than the first. Rebelsky every single Friday night, he wrote the Similarly, l'chayra, one could do the same. We answered up the seer which is Sifkat and Dalet and Sifkat and Hey. Lamaisa, are there machmirim? There are. They do quote B'Shem Rav Aaron Kotler that he said that Lamaisa, who's a wine connoisseur to make the bracha? All we'll point out is, first of all, where did we see that? Okay, but that's not a, can't say that. Rav Aaron said it. But maybe one could suggest in the last 50 years, the world has definitely changed, that there definitely is more wine accessible, definitely is more wine around. And definitely, maybe we're at the level that Rav Aaron would be maskim, that we are called at some level a wine connoisseur, and one could certainly follow the halacha, follow the Mishnah Berurah, the Rebelski or Scheinberg, make a teva meitiv b'siyata dishmaya.